Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Previously, we began what, by all appearances, seems to be the final trial segment of this duology. Oh, the end is so close, it's exhilarating. And also exhilarating, we're cross-examining a judge, Judge Shigoku of Japan. And we were able to show that he had a hit list in his office. And it was telegrammed over to us, and we were able to show it as proof, so now he's forced to testify. And to that end, we have some pressing to do. Let's begin. It's true that Kazuma Sogi was assigned the assassination mission 1 year ago now.
Hold it!
A year ago? When Kazuma was still in Japan then? Correct. It was at the examination center for applicants for the study tour that I approached him. I'll never forget it. I remember exactly what you said. You just came out and asked me forthright if I'd consider traveling to Britain on an assassination mission. Surely not. I thought it was a joke at first, of course, but then it was made clear to me that if I didn't accept, I wouldn't be considered for the study tour. So you agreed to it? Just for that? I mean, I know how much you wanted to study in England, but assassination? The Empire of Japan had accepted a proposal from the British Empire at the time. An agreement to send a student from each country to the others to deepen cultural understanding and friendship. But behind the scenes, the chosen students were to be given assassination missions. I had no choice but to accept the proposal that originated from my British counterpart. Why? Why didn't you expose the plot there and then? Britain acknowledges no part in these alleged misbegotten dealings. I advise you not to make such spurious allegations, Foreign Minister Shigoku. As a witness, I am bound to tell the truth, my lord. Anyway, I picked Asogi and explained the details of the plan to him. Gee, I wonder who the other person is. Whoever could it be? Ho ho. The target was Inspector T. Gregson. That was a condition of the British study tour.
Hold it!
Why, Kazuma? Why did you pick him as the assassin? He was the most capable of all the applicants, and in addition, I knew his desire to travel to Britain was very strong. In fact, it was almost more than a desire. It was his whole purpose in life. Yes, as his best friend, I can certainly attest to that. The way he threw himself into his studies, the way he pursued becoming qualified as a lawyer. It was all ultimately for that one single goal of being accepted on a study tour to Britain. And of course, we know the reason behind that. He was determined to find out for himself the truth about his father, Genshin Isogi. There's nothing I wouldn't have done to get here. Be that agreeing to assume the role of an assassin, or betraying people's trust. Well, you certainly did a fine job of betraying mine, Asogi. But why was Inspector Gregson the target? I have no idea. Those were the orders from Britain. I was in no position to question them. You have no idea. Really? I find that hard to believe. Oh, do you? Judge Shigoku was once a visiting student here in Britain himself, of course. Perhaps he has some connection with Inspector Gregson from that time. He does. He does. The defense really ought to catch up. With what? With the fact that the assassin exchange has absolutely nothing to do with the case under scrutiny here. Yes, I've already admitted to recruiting Asogi. However, in the end, something happened that meant the young man was unable to carry out his mission. I presume you're referring to the incident that occurred during Kazuma's passage to Britain in January. The awful tragedy that took place on the steamship. Word arrived at the ministry some 2 weeks after the ship's departure from our shores. The visiting student had been killed, but his body had somehow gone missing in Hong Kong. The news was wired to me from a detective I'd placed on the ship to accompany the assassin. Obviously, Kazuma didn't actually die at all, but he did lose his memory, including all details about his special mission. Did you not consider dispatching another assassin at that point? That wasn't possible, simply because that black-clad young student over there had already put himself forward as a Soki's replacement. And there was no way to stop him from reaching Britain. Oh. My hands were completely tied. So Mr. Sholmes' strategy worked perfectly. He predicted everything that would happen. Months later, my memory returned, but I'd never intended to go through with the assassination mission anyway. So you were playing me right from the outset, were you? Is that it? I'd sooner be guilty of that crime than of taking someone else's life. I was prepared to do whatever I had to in order to get myself here to Britain. This line of questioning has gone on long enough. All the court should be concerned about in the testimony given by this witness are details relating to his relationship with Inspector Gregson and the victim's murder. In that case, as I've already made perfectly clear, I had no connection to the man or his death. And you have some means of substantiating this plea. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on duty outside my cabin at all times.
Hold it!
Outside your cabin in the first-class area of the SS Grouse, you mean? Yes, that's right. Not least because there was a murder of a student passenger earlier in the year, I imagine. The liner operators have taken to posting a crewman outside every first-class cabin door. I can confirm the presence of the crewman guard myself. What do you mean? Because I accompanied Inspector Gregson to Dunkirk that night. I witnessed it with my own eyes. There was a well-built crewman standing guard directly in front of the door to the witness's cabin. At that particular time, of course, I'd gone to the ship's dining room for dinner. The inspector and I asked the crewman to allow us into the cabin while we waited for Judge Shigoku's return. I suppose Inspector Gregson was there in his capacity as the Reaper. He was intending to take the witness's life. Exactly. As I've said numerous times now, I had no intention of killing anyone. So the crewman let 2 potential assassins into the cabin he was supposed to be guarding? Not the most convincing of centuries, really. In truth, those were my thoughts too. But anyway, I stayed to talk with Inspector Gregson for a short while. Then I left him there and made my way off the ship alone. Was the guard still at the door when you went? Yes, he glared at me as I walked past. You see, that proves it. If there'd been a shot fired, the crewman would have heard it, so clearly I can't be involved.
Hold it!
The crewman who was standing directly outside your cabin door, you mean? That's right. A muscular man with a permanent grim expression on his face. He didn't once move from that spot. Are you sure? To be honest, I thought he was a miserable fellow. But as it happens, he's a vital witness now. There's no doubt that Gregson was killed by a gunshot, and it's inconceivable that a crewman standing just outside the cabin door wouldn't have heard that. But wait, what about the ship's enormous steam engines? The noise of them could have drowned out the sound of the gun being fired. Sadly, unjudicial assistant, that won't wash.
Oh,
You will recall that my cabin was in the first-class area of the ship, which is also, of course, the quietest. Don't imagine for a moment that it's anything like steerage, where the judicial assistants go.
I didn't mean...
But a hole like that made by a bullet was found in your cabin, Judge Shikoku. That's compelling evidence that a gun was fired in there. What's that? A bullet hole? Oh yes, you're talking about what the detective uncovered in the wall yesterday, I presume. That was obviously a rotten panel eaten out by woodworm. No doubt he didn't find an actual bullet. Ugh, that's the hole in this argument. Sadly, I was unable to arrange for the crewman to be brought back to Britain with me. But obviously, if a gun had been fired in my cabin on the night in question, as the defense implies, I would have been arrested on the spot and would never have made it to Britain in the first place. Very true. The witness's logic is sound. Since no gunshot was heard from the witness's cabin on the night in question, we must assume that the witness is telling the truth. I'm glad you've seen sense, my lord. I know Kazuma's already admitted to taking on this incredible assassination plot, but even so, hearing it confirmed by somebody else is still a real shock.
It's unforgivable. Using Kazuma-sama's feelings to manipulate him into agreeing to such a despicable plan.
But I think Kazuma manipulated Judge Shigoku too. He completely double-crossed him.
Oh dear, it's hard not to see that as a stroke of brilliance on Kazuma-sama's part.
One way or another, though, Gregson ended up dead. I really think that the murder must have happened aboard that steamship.
So you mean...
Judge Shigoku must be lying.
I know I shouldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. But you must destroy him, Mr. Naruhodo.
Hell yeah! Oh, she's angry. Oh. So he says that the guard would be posted and would have heard the gunshot, but what if the guard was missing at the time? All crew members are required to assemble on the main deck at 10 p.m. There was a window of time, 20 minutes worth, where no crewman would be near to hear it. Let's see. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on duty outside my cabin at all times, he says. And this is the day in question. That's not true.
Objection!
Yes, as the court has heard, there was a crewman posted outside Judge Shigoku's cabin. However, we can be sure that, contrary to the witness's claim, the guard wasn't there at all times. What? I have here a notice of a particular event that was scheduled to take place aboard the steamship on the 31st. Where did you get that? It's evidence gathered by Mr. Herlock Sholmes. You were acquainted yesterday, if you remember. Herlock Sholmes again. According to this itinerary, after leaving the port of Dunkirk at exactly 10 p.m., and for a period of 20 minutes, all crewmen of the SS Grouse were to gather on deck for an evacuation drill. All crewmen were away from their posts. And during that 20-minute interval, of course, any gunshots emanating from your cabin would have been heard by no one. In summary, Judge Shigoku, you had ample opportunity to commit the crime. Urgh.
Objection!
A 20-minute window of opportunity. That's an excellent find, Ryunosuke. But it amounts to nothing.
Why?
Because the witness clearly stated in his testimony that no incident occurred in his cabin. Unless you have some decisive evidence that can show his testimony to be false, your accusation is nothing more than conjecture.
I think I have something.
Very true. Well, counsel. Inspector Gregson was killed in Judge Shigoku's cabin that night. I'm certain of it. Because the defense has the evidence to prove it. You will present the evidence for the defense at once, counsel. What proof do you have that the victim's life was taken in Shigoku's cabin on the 31st of October? This small component belonged to Gregson's dear, precious pocket watch, and yet it was separated from it, probably in the same instant that the glass in the watch got shattered. And it somehow found its way into the cabin. It's gotta be this, right? Yeah.
Take that!
Judge Shigoku, this was found in your cabin yesterday. What is that? The crown of a pocket watch? Oh, he would recognize it on sight. He loves pocket watches. Okay, that's real good. a pocket watch? And if you will observe, the victim's pocket watch, which we know he treasured, is missing precisely that part. It can't be. Moreover, this crown is a perfect fit on the spindle protruding from the victim's watch. Now, the fact that this was retrieved from Judge Shigoku's cabin tells us that the victim's watch almost certainly broke there. In other words, the victim was killed on the 31st during the 20-minute evacuation drill, in the cabin occupied by you, Judge Shigoku. Well, you're razor sharp, aren't you, you young murderer?
Objection!
Expertly maneuvered, Ryunosuke. And your argument sounds entirely plausible. At first. Oh, here we go. But rather like this pocket watch, it's full of cracks. What? And I believe Judge Shigoku feels the same way. I was wrong to acquit you earlier in the year. Sorry? If I'd known that would result in anyone having to listen to this drivel, I would have declared you guilty just to spare the world your ridiculous bombast. Ouch. I think it's clear that the witness will have to give further testimony. When you hear what actually happened in my cabin that night, you'll notice the pitfall into which you've stumbled. Prior to your renewed testimony, I would like to clarify one point. The fact that this part of the victim's watch was discovered in your cabin means that you acknowledge he was there, I presume. Yes, I do. Very well then. You may proceed to give your formal testimony about what exactly happened in your cabin aboard the ship on the evening of the 31st of October. Of course. As a man of the law, I have no intention of obstructing justice. I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin after finishing my evening meal in the dining room. When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me. I soon took care of him with a Nippon Sayo throw, though he couldn't wait to run away after that. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. It has nothing to do with his murder. The inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain, because his body was found in London. Ippon Seoi. A common jujutsu martial arts technique in my country. I was careful not to use too much force, but the man obviously landed too heavily for his watch to take. So, Ryunosuke Naruhodo, I imagine you can see the flaw in your logic now, can't ya? What? The fact that the pocket watch was broken in the witness's cabin in no way proves that the victim's murder took place there.
Ag!
I've no doubt the inspector intended to kill me, but he didn't manage to pull the trigger. Yes, because he was merely the tactician, not the Reaper's hand of death. Well, the testimony appears to make perfect sense so far as I can tell. Let me express my deep gratitude for your understanding, my lord. But if this testimony holds, Judge Goku will be deemed to have had no involvement in the case. Well, counsel, I really see no reason for wasting precious court time here on the cross-examination. Sorry, my lord, the defense has a right to cross-examine, and I don't intend to squander that. You're an embarrassment to your countrymen, not knowing when you're beaten. In that case, proceed, Mr. Naruhodo. Gladly. And I don't like this Jigoku guy. What a meanie pants. I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin after finishing my evening meal in the dining room.
Hold it!
Because the so-called guard posted at your cabin door had just let your killer pass, you mean? Apparently, Gregson told the crewman he was a police inspector, which was the truth, of course. He wouldn't have had his identification with him, though. He had his trench coat and mustache, not to mention the bag of chips. I imagine the crewman was convinced. But the man accompanying him would have had 2 swords slung around his waist. You mean me? Who else? Yes, that's true. You would have hoped the sight of a few swords might have set off alarm bells in the guard's head. The point is, I left the cabin before its occupant returned and immediately disembarked the ship. Certainly, all I can tell you is that only the inspector was waiting for me when I arrived back at my cabin. And you entered without any inkling of suspicion. That's right, none whatsoever. When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me.
Hold it!
Obviously, you're talking about Inspector Gregson. Yes, though at the time I didn't know the man's name. And there was no time for introductions. I value my life over manners. By which you mean that the inspector was there to assassinate you, I suppose. That was certainly the impression given by the gun pointing in my direction. But I've never seen the muzzle of a revolver shake about so much in all my life. Anyone would think the man had never shot somebody before. Believe it or not, most of us haven't. Anyway, there was no time to call for the help of the crewman at the door, so I dealt with the man myself. I soon took care of him with an Ippon Seoi throw, though. He couldn't wait to run away after that. Say that 4 times fast.
Hold it!
Even though the man had a gun? That was a very brave move, wasn't it? My Ippon Seoi is far faster than a bullet, I can assure you. But surely all that commotion caused the crewman to come in, didn't it? Yes, of course. He burst in immediately without knocking. The inspector hurled himself at the stocky fellow and just managed to slip past him to make his escape. The outstanding guard does it again. Luckily, there aren't many situations I can't get out of using a quick Ippon-Seoi throw. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. It has nothing to do with his murder.
Hold it!
The crown snapped off and the glass covering the face of the watch was cracked. Preferable to the man's head being pulled off or his spine cracking, wouldn't you say? Not that the man was spared for long. A bullet to the chest soon saw to that. But the point is, the broken pocket watch doesn't prove that a murder took place. Absolutely not. All the watch proves is the power of my jujutsu throw. Whatever you say, it doesn't quite ring true that no shot was fired in that cabin. Because there was an obvious bullet hole in the wall. What are you talking about? Huh? That's what the star of your lowbrow detective stories told you, is it? Well, I don't care for such fiction. Haven't you worked it out yet, you little stripling? No murder took place in my cabin. The inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain, because his body was found in London.
Hold it!
Why do I feel like... taking a page out of Apollo Justice's notebook, why do I feel like him stroking his beard in thought is his tell? Whenever he's talked about the most suspect things, he's been doing that. But there's no evidence that proves the victim ever returned to London alive. Just take a moment to think that idea of yours through now, stripling. What? If the inspector was killed on the steamship in France, how on earth could he have got back to Britain? When people die, their bodies remain at that same spot. It's a devil of a thing. Well, then obviously the culprit must have moved the body. How exactly? Carrying a corpse off a ship in your arms would raise a few eyebrows at least, don't you think? Well, yes, that's true, but... All passenger luggage is inspected when it is unloaded from arriving vessels. And I would like to think the border police would query the corpse of an English gentleman as hand luggage. If the murder had taken place aboard the ship, you would imagine the body would have been disposed of at sea. There would be no sense in risking being caught by attempting to transport the body back to Britain. Ugh, that's killed that idea then. But perhaps not. Mr. Sato? We've heard that the first-class passengers were under constant scrutiny by the crewmen posted to guard them, which would mean that the culprit had no opportunity to dispose of the body in the sea. Yes, that's true. So transporting the body to Britain may have been the only viable alternative. Dear me, you really are new to this, aren't you? I thought I'd been perfectly clear, but it seems I'm going to have to explain it in words you can understand. I think I ought to alter my testimony. With your consent, of course, my lord. I have no objection. State your amended testimony now. Oh, okay. There's no possible way I could have transported the victim's corpse back to Britain.
Hold it!
Huh. There's an idea. Think about it, stripling. All passengers and crew disembarked at the same time and passed through the same checks at the border. The symposium guests were then driven straight to the hotel in carriages organized by the ministry.
And we met you as soon as you arrived at the hotel.
So you did. Well then, remind me, did I have a corpse over my shoulder at the time? No way. No way! No way!
Was Gregson in that the whole Oh my god!
This whole time, for hours, I was fretting over this photograph, sweating, thinking it would be a Stardust Crusaders moment, that someone here would die. Little did I know, someone here was already dead.
No way!
Oh no. No.
Oh, wow. What? No.
So we're in agreement then. I couldn't possibly have brought the inspector's body back to Britain. Unless, of course, they've developed some clever device these days to instantly move things from A to B.
Funny you should say that. Professor Harebrain's invention didn't actually work, if you remember, Mr. Naruhodo.
Yes, of course. The defense has become unusually quiet, I notice. Yes, because there's really nothing more to say.
So that's his story. Well, I suppose if you think about it. Whenever you drop a teacup in the office and it breaks, we don't say, Mr. Naruhodo must have been murdered there, do we?
Is that a veiled threat about what might happen to me if I break another one?
And the fact is that Inspector Gregson's body was found in the little room on Fresno Street.
She didn't say no.
If he really was killed in Judge Jigoku's cabin,
the body would have had to have been moved somehow, obviously. Transporting a dead body over a country border, that would be impossible for the majority of people. So there must have been some special circumstances that made it possible for the culprit then.
That could be a vital realization, I think, Mr. Naruhodo.
Special circumstances. Is there anything that would, say, hey, this dude's a super important man, skip his inspection and expedite his travel? Let's see. Well, this is Gregson's passport that he got with Kazuma as his +1. Not quite related. Look, we don't need to present hard, conclusive proof right now. We just need to contradict this. There's no possible way I could have transported the victim's corpse back to Britain. And yet he had this huge trunk that he himself hid in. At a later point. You could have hid the body in there. Now, I know they were talking about that the luggage does get checked. But maybe we can talk about that after I show this?
Objection!
Oh. There's no possible way you could have moved Inspector Gregson's body, you say? I would say the opposite is true. And what's that supposed to mean? Far from being impossible for you to do, the transporting of Inspector Gregson's body back to Britain is something only you could do. What are you talking about, Ryunosuke? As well as being a judge, Mr. Jigoku is also Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, which means he's exempt from having his luggage searched when he enters the country. We learned that when we first met you upon your arrival in London. Well, all those passport checks and luggage searches at the border took rather a lot of time. I must say I'm very envious of your ministerial status. You didn't have to go through any of that, did you? Oh, I knew you were jealous. Ha 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 ha. I presume you recall this, Judge Jigoku. God damn it. It's a photograph we took in the foyer of the hotel to mark the occasion. As the court will note, you have with you your large travel trunk. Large enough, in fact, to have a corpse inside.
Mr. Naruhodo, surely you're not suggesting...
I'm afraid I am, yes. 3 days ago, when we were chatting innocently with the new arrivals from Japan in the hotel, the body of Inspector Gregson was just meters away from us, inside Judge Jigoku's trunk. Oh, that was a great transition. Oh, bravo. Good show game. Order, order, order in the court. I'm skeptical, counsel, that a grown man's body could fit inside even the largest travel trunk. It could. Because I happen to know that the witness himself, a man of considerable size, fits inside his trunk. And verifying that would be extremely simple, wouldn't it, Judge Jigoku?
But inside his trunk, how horrifying.
And after we'd spoken with you at the Great Waterloo Hotel, you had the opportunity to visit the apparent scene on Fresno Street, taking your trunk with you in a cab to deposit the inspector's body. I don't have to listen to this nonsense. Dr. Gori, the coroner who examined the body, has confirmed the possibility. She's acknowledged there are signs that steps may have been taken to disguise the true time of death. The onset of the body's decomposition could have been delayed by storing it in a refrigerator. Counsel, as I remember explaining yesterday, refrigerators of the requisite size are few and far between. Yes, I'm sure they are. But one place they're certainly found is on the large ocean liners. Such ships are equipped with electrically refrigerated cold rooms to keep food fresh on their long sea voyages, and the SS Grouse is no exception. Professor Mikotoba told me about it only yesterday. Well, Judge Jigoku? However much you prolong this debate, you can't eliminate the truth. All the evidence points to you being the killer. Well, this is all very heartening. Uh-oh. I can see that it was a wise move letting Nasogi and you embark on this study tour. What are you talking about now? Logical reasoning, of course. All court proceedings will be built on logical reasoning in the new century. And I can see that you've both laid firm foundations for that already. He's not exactly denying it just yet.
Judge Jigoku, please, stop diverting attention from the issue at hand. The defense has made an accusation against you. How do you respond?
Respond? There's really no need for me to respond, is there?
Why ever not?
Because before you can even begin to answer the question of when the victim was killed, you must first establish one key fact. Where was the victim killed? It's quite logical.
The actual scene of the crime?
The prosecution's stance is unaltered. The killing took place on Fresno Street when the gunshot was heard. As the accused, Barak van Zieks shot the victim at point-blank range. Since no tangible evidence exists to disprove the prosecution's claim at this time, the defense's deductions amount to little more than an elaborate fairy tale. I'm afraid that's how the logical reasoning of the British are known for really works, young stripling.
The victim was shot in that little room on Fresno Street and died instantly. I'm afraid it's the prosecution's claim that's the only fairy tale here.
How can you say that?
Quite simply, because that claim directly contradicts a certain piece of evidence in our possession.
Very tantalizing, counsel. I think you had better explain yourself to the court, don't you?
The prosecution claims that Inspector Gregson died instantly when he was shot at the scene on Fresno Street. But this evidence clearly contradicts that claim. I mean, we were over this. There was no gunshot, there was a firecracker. Was there ever proof that this was fired? A type of revolver that's standard issue for members of the judiciary. Asked about whether records are kept about who they're issued to. I was told that for the past 5 years, been engraved with a unique serial number. No serial number on this gun. Must have been issued longer ago than that. Oh. No rifling marks? No, that would be in the bullet, wouldn't it? Huh. Caliber of the gun matches the standard issue firearms for members of the judiciary. So it matches the revolver, to be sure. Died instantly when shot at the scene on Fresno Street. Died instantly. Oh, the watch? Maybe he would have wound it up before... No, that's just conjecture. Crap, this feels like it should be simple. Directly contradicts something. Died, shot and died instantly. Shot and died instantly. Oh, I so want to say the firecracker, but I feel like that would be an amateur mistake on Kazuma's part. Is there anything pointing to Gregson living on for a little bit after he was shot? Or maybe it's in the room. Shot and died instantly.
There was blood on the ground. Oh, I feel like an idiot. I'm expecting something obvious to jump out at me, but nothing is. Shot and died instantly. Ah. Oh my god, why... One of these pieces of evidence contradicts the claim that he was shot and killed instantly in that little room on Fresno Street. I mean, if there was do we know if this gun was fired at all? I mean, I looked at it. There's no serial number on it. But there's nothing about whether it was even fired. I forget if they talked about that. I mean, surely it was. Otherwise, this trial would have taken a different swerve a long time ago. Fine, the fireworks.
Take that!
The Japanese really are a curious breed. To proffer an argument with such conviction, only to present such nonsensical evidence.
Perhaps my Japanese friend's inexplicable thinking is why people talk of the mystique of the East. In case you hadn't noticed, I'm not the only Japanese around here. Do you even have a mirror?
The court is not interested in the mystique of anything. You will be penalized accordingly.
Was the victim killed in the room on Fresno Street, or was he moved there after his death? There's one piece of evidence we have that shows the answer to that question surprisingly clearly. Shut up! Clearly! Try to present the correct one this time, then fine. I'm gonna try again, or can't you hold your hand steady enough to point it out? Why would he put on the hairpiece if he was going to go meet his ally? I mean, they just talked about, they were just talking about measures to disguise the time of death. They were just talking about this. And in fact, it does say, close range from the front resulting in instant death. What the hell? I mean, tightly curled up. If he was standing and was shot, he wouldn't have time to curl up if he died instantly?
Take that!
Huh? What? What? Okay.
A photograph of the victim in the very location you claim he wasn't killed.
Yes, but the point is the posture of the body... No, really? Okay, the posture of the body itself. If Inspector Gregson had been shot there in that room, it's out of the question that his body would have been curled up in a ball like that.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your logic is flawed. You could easily have adopted that fetal position due to the pain of the shot, which subsequently proved fatal.
Objection!
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Judge Goku, but it's your logic that is flawed.
What?
According to this autopsy report, the victim died instantly. He would have felt no pain, much less have been able to draw himself into that position.
Oh!
Which begs the question of why the victim's body is curled up in that way. Though the answer should be abundantly clear by now.
You're suggesting...
The inspector's body took on that posture ahead of its arrival on Fresno Street, before it was coldly turned out on the floor, from the inside of a large travel trunk.
No.
You're quite right. The shape of the body. It looks exactly as if it had been kept in a confined space.
Wow, I get it.
Judge Goku, present your trunk for examination. I believe it's very possible that it will contain traces of the victim's blood.
Arg! Present my trunk. I refuse.
What? On what grounds?
I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Empire of Japan. I shouldn't have to put up with this treatment just because of some strikingly baseless accusations.
In other words, Judge Goku, there is blood in your trunk.
I decline to answer that. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have privileges at...
At this moment, you're not a government minister. You are a witness in a trial in Britain's highest court. I don't care who you are or what your status outside this courtroom might be, you will not withhold information. Nothing is more important than the truth.
Arg!
Oh, he hates it.
Order! Order! In the court. Well, Mr. Jigoku, what's it to be?
You can't be serious. You did it?
Have you no shame at all, Kazuma Asogi?
What?
Very well, I admit it. I did bring the inspector's body into the country. Inside my trunk, exactly as postulated by the defense.
What? You?
Dear God, outrageous!
So it was you.
No, I admit to nothing more than what I've said. Of killing the man, I certainly have no recollection. What on earth is that cryptic statement supposed to mean? I merely disposed of the inspector's body, which was left in my cabin, in order to avoid unwanted attention. As the judicial assistant over there pointed out, I had no chance to throw it into the ocean. So I decided my only option was to bring it into Britain with me and dispose of it somewhere else.
You can't still deny it. If you didn't do it, then who on earth did kill the man?
As you know, there was one other person in my cabin that night. He had the opportunity. And moreover, he'd already accepted a mission to take the inspector's life.
Oh.
That's right. Who else could it have been? It was you, Kazuma Asogi.
You... I never thought you'd stoop to this, Seishiro Jigoku.
You've taken the words straight out of my mouth, Prosecutor Kazuma Asogi. You thought by leaving the body in my cabin you could pin the crime on me, did you? Well, the prosecution counsel has already admitted to visiting the witness's cabin on the night in question. Yes, on an assassination mission, no less.
You wouldn't...
So, what do you make of that, young stripling? You've heard my testimony now. That's all I have to say on the matter. I'll admit to nothing more.
I don't believe this.
Counsel for the defense, What is your position now? The court awaits your response to the witness's assertion. The assertion that on the night in question, the victim's assailant was in fact Mr. Kazuma Asogi.
This isn't the dead end it seems to be. The answer's right in front of me. It comes down to Chigoku or Kazuma. Both of them had the opportunity to kill Gregson, but only one of them did it. And I'm just a step away from proving who. Very well. The defense is ready to respond to the assertion put forward by Judge Chigoku. The idea that the victim's murder could have been committed by Prosecutor Asogi is... Well, what about the chipped sword in the trunk? There's a slashy slash chipped sword. Did we ever establish when that happened? I want to say it's possible. Oh, I feel like I'm about to backstab my best friend. Oh, it's possible. We need more evidence. Well, it is possible, my lord. What? How could you? Do you think I want to believe it? But the fact is, I can't say with complete certainty what actually happened because I wasn't there. You disappoint me, Ryunosuke. If I may, Mr. Naruhodo, I think perhaps that's why we form opinions based on evidence. Yeah, the slashy slash of the trunk? Ah, so true. And actually, we have evidence that can settle this argument conclusively? Wait, what? We do? My lord, the defense would like to present evidence...
Before you plow on, feigning ignorance of what just occurred, counsel, you must be penalized for that short but embarrassing you uttered a moment ago.
I really thought I could just brush past it if I was quick enough. Never mind the penalty, Mr. Naruhodo. The truth is all that matters. Judge Goku, let me remind you of something you said only a few minutes ago. You claimed that logical reasoning is the future of the judicial process.
It is, no question.
Well, logical reasoning can prove something here. Namely, that it would have been impossible for Prosecutor Asogi to commit the crime.
What?
Man, if I were Capcom and I was feeling mean, I would make pressing that "it was possible" button guarantee a bad ending or some sort.
The court will only accept an argument that is supported by compelling evidence. So present what you have, counsel. What proof is there that allegedly demonstrates the impossibility of Prosecutor Asogi's involvement?
Okay, we know Kazuma was on board. And he says that he just left the room and disembarked into Dunkirk. Um... What? Oh, sod it. I'm just gonna look this up. Come on, man. I don't know. The evacuation drill again? What? The night before the ship arrived in Dover. Found in Judge Goku's cabin. It was super late at night. What?
Take that!
This itinerary for crew members of the SS Grouse, my lord. This is conclusive proof. What? An itinerary? How does that prove anything? Yeah, that's what I want to know. I don't get it. Judge Goku, the moment you acknowledged that you found the victim's body in your cabin, this itinerary suddenly became much more significant. It did? What? Why? On the night in question, as always, a crewman sentry was on guard outside your cabin door. As long as he was there, nobody could have fired a shot inside the cabin. Absolutely, because it's inconceivable that the guard wouldn't have heard it and come to investigate. So that tells us that the crime must have taken place when the guard was elsewhere. And that narrows it down to the 20 minutes just after 10 o'clock, as indicated on the itinerary. Yes, I see no flaw in your reasoning so far. But the crucial point is this. When the evacuation drill took place, the steamship had already put to sea from the port of Dunkirk. Oh... They both begin with D. I got confused. Oh. Now, clearly the murder could only have been committed by somebody who was aboard the vessel at the time. But Prosecutor Asogi stated in yesterday's proceedings, I didn't come to Great Britain to take anyone's life, so I left Gregson and disembarked the ship. I spent that night at a boarding house in the town and returned to England the following morning. Which I'm sure the court will agree is conclusive proof that Kazuma Asogi couldn't possibly have carried out the killing. Gag! No, absolutely not. I don't accept that at all. What do you mean? The boy's just saying that to exonerate himself. We can't trust that he really disembarked the vessel. Obviously, after he left my cabin, he hid himself somewhere nearby on the ship. Just waiting for his chance to come back and... No, that's out of the question. Isn't it, Kazuma? Yeah, the record of his stay would be logged in the hostel, right? As the defense rightly recalls, I disembarked the vessel and spent the night in a boarding house in Dunkirk. And as I said yesterday, I signed my name in the accommodations register book. All extremely easy to verify and undeniable proof. No. There's no escape this time. You can forget that you're a judge or a government minister. It's time you gave the court an honest answer, as a common man. You killed Inspector Tobias Gregson and transported his corpse back to Britain. Then you dumped the body in the room on Fresno Street and made it look as if the murder had happened there. That's what really happened, isn't it, Seishiro Jigoku?
It was that damn trial 10 years ago. That's when all this began. Looking back now, my fate was decided that day. I was doomed already.
Oh! No! Huh? What? Who's that?
It's over. My life is over.
Okay, I guess. Yeah, oh. A British assassin to eliminate a professor in Japan. A Japanese assassin to eliminate a detective in Britain. Both assassins will use diplomatic immunity to evade conviction and return safely to their homelands.
The assassin exchange request arrived from Britain about 1 year ago. Though it was hardly a request, it was a demand.
And for that, you decided to recruit Mr. Asogi.
But things didn't go according to plan.
Oh, but things didn't go according to plan. Your chosen assassin never made it to Britain. And you found yourself unable to dispatch a replacement. Because I was already on my way to Britain at that time in Cosmo's place.
And that left me with only one option for carrying out my obligation. To eliminate the mark myself, personally. Of course, there was but a single opportunity for me to do that.
The International Forensic Science Symposium, I presume.
That's right. I decided it would be safest to carry out the plan before my arrival in Britain. So I enlisted the help of my British counterpart. And made arrangements for a pretext that would take the inspector to Dunkirk. To lure that man in, he was given a sham mission by the Reaper.
What? The Reaper? There's only one person who could have done that. The mastermind of the entire operation. The Reaper himself. Ah! So that means that the assassin exchange was... It was all planned by the Reaper.
I'm not at liberty to say anything about my British counterpart. Anyway, the inspector accepted the Reaper's mission and dutifully infiltrated my cabin on the steamship. It was all a trap designed to lead him to France and his own death.
Oh, how awful.
It was past 9 o'clock when I returned to my cabin from the dining hall that evening. I didn't give him time to attack me. I choked him until he lost consciousness. But there was a guard just outside the door, so I left it at that for the time being. Even the slightest noise might have aroused suspicion, so I bided my time waiting.
For the 20 minutes after 10 o'clock.
I had intended to finish him by strangulation, but moments before I had the chance, he suddenly came around and went for me in a reckless move. I had received the British-issue gun 16 years earlier, being a member of the judiciary as a visiting student. I never imagined I'd have to use it for something like that.
So the revolver belongs to you, does it? Then the victim was killed inside your cabin on the SS Grouse. Which begs the question of why you arranged for his body to be discovered in the room on Fresno Street.
The young judicial assistant over there has already answered that question. There was no way I could take the body up on deck to throw it over the side. That's precisely where all the crewmen were gathered for the evacuation drill. So before the first-class cabin sentries returned, I took the corpse to the refrigeration room.
And then, on arriving in Dover, you concealed the body in your trunk in order to smuggle it past the border police.
I knew I needed to take steps if the police were to be convinced when the body was found in London.
In that case, you must have known. You must have had intimate details of Inspector Gregson's intended schedule.
Yes, my British counterpart sent me everything I needed to know. The inspector was due at Fresno Street at 5 o'clock that afternoon, in order to meet a man by the name of Hugh Boone, from whom he would take his police identification.
Ah!
I decided that man would be the perfect person to set up as the culprit. So I took a hackney carriage over there with the body still in my trunk.
That must have been just after we took this photograph with you at the hotel, then.
Yes, I wasn't expecting a welcoming committee. I was more than a little nervous. On Fresno Street, I spotted a young girl selling little firecrackers.
Miss Venus, of course.
I conceived of the candle trick there and then. So I donned a simple disguise and approached the girl to buy enough firecrackers to replicate a gunshot.
What sort of disguise?
For some reason, the inspector had a bright red hairpiece in his own traveling case. So I put that on, although I suspect I drew more attention to myself in that than I would have otherwise.
The hairpiece we found at the scene. The inspector had it ready for the Red-Headed League investigation.
I only arrived at the room at around 4:45, so I quickly placed the body on the floor, moved the notice board, and set up my little candle trick. I arranged it so the firecrackers would go off with a bang around 15 minutes later, so that Mr. Boone, who was due to arrive at 5, would walk straight into a trap. Except, at the last moment, I made a careless blunder.
What was that? I imagine it was the bag of fish and chips. Ah!
I didn't notice it had fallen out of his overcoat pocket when I moved the body to the refrigeration room. I put it back into his pocket the following morning, but... well, it seems the warmth of the heated cabin had accelerated the decay of the fish. Anyway, that's everything. All the sordid details of what I did.
Phew. What a story.
I've heard enough. We've arrived at the truth about the murder of one of the country's most capable and respected police inspectors. The witness will be tried in the coming days. For a crime of such a vile nature, you can expect the most severe penalty.
An exchange of assassins. What a foolhardy idea. Mr. Jigoku, one last detail. Who was your counterpart in Britain? Who was the mastermind behind the assassin exchange? Nothing you say now can make matters any worse for you. Just tell us.
Enough! I've already told you that I cannot say.
Even though as things stand, you may very well never set foot in your homeland again.
What are you waiting for? Can't we get this over with now? It's finished, all of it. I'm finished.
He's scared of something.
Then, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I now pronounce the findings of this court. This man before us has admitted to the willful murder of Tobias Gregson.
Seishiro Jigoku, it is the opinion of this court that you should be found guilty. And may I remind all those present of the strict confidentiality demanded by this closed court. Huh. I was kind of expecting a objection there, but okay, I'll take that. We're definitely at a turning point. This is nowhere near it. We've only solved half of this mystery. We still don't know who the Reaper is. What really happened 10 years ago. No, there is still a lot left to uncover. But as to how that will come to pass, I don't know. Are we going to raise an objection after this? Like, what's gonna happen? Huh. Well, I can't believe it. Gregson's body really was in that trunk the whole time. And that incidental funny story about how Jigoku broke a bench 10 years ago in the trial of the professor. My god, it happened again. Kind of weird that all the pieces flew away from him up to the ceiling. Like, where'd they go? Are they still up there? Are they gonna fall down or something? Wow. You know, it seems so obvious in hindsight that as this franchise would go on, eventually you would find a judge guilty of a murder. Wow. Like, you certainly had plenty of prosecutors guilty of murder, but a judge. Man. And speaking of judges guilty of murder, we still don't know who the Reaper is. I don't believe for a second that, like, Strunhardt could, like, go out and kill people in his spare time. Like, how are all these people who evaded Van Zieks' prosecution, how did they all die? Who killed them? There's just something here that doesn't make sense to me. And hopefully in the coming videos we can answer that question, but yes, this video has gone on quite long enough, so I am Zephyr the Jester. This has been more of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you next time. So until then, please take care.